Fiancée cheated with my cousin, my rich uncle covered it up, and my parents sided with them, so I took. Nathan had always believed that love was about effort, about the little things that made someone's world brighter. And for Clara, he had done it all. From extravagant surprises to thoughtful, everyday gestures, he had poured his heart into their relationship. The crowning jewel of his devotion was the 1967 Mustang he had painstakingly restored for her. Every bolt, every layer of polish was his way of showing her how much he cared. She had smiled when he unveiled it, had taken pictures and posted them online, but even then, he had felt it, that flicker of emptiness behind her enthusiasm. Clara liked the idea of love more than love itself. She craved the picture-perfect relationship, the social media-worthy moments, but not the reality of commitment. And that truth came crashing down on Nathan one evening at what should have been a simple family gathering. The room was warm with the sound of clinking glasses and soft laughter as dinner wrapped up at his parents' house. Nathan had stepped away, his mind preoccupied with work and wedding plans, when a flicker of movement caught his eye near his father's office door. A shadow, a hushed giggle. Something in his gut twisted. He wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but something about it felt off. As he approached the slightly ajar door, he heard voices, low, urgent. Clara's voice. And another. Logan. Nathan's cousin. The golden boy of the family. A man who had never worked a real job in his life, coasting through existence on the wealth of Uncle Richard. Where Nathan had struggled, Logan had been handed everything. And yet, here he was, taking more. Taking what was Nathan's. Nathan pushed the door open. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Clara. Her back pressed against his father's desk. Logan. Standing between her legs, hands possessively on her waist. Their heads snapped toward him, Clara's expression a mask of horror, Logan's lips curling slightly. Not in regret, not even in surprise, but something almost smug, as if he had expected Nathan to find them, as if he had wanted him to. Silence crushed the air in the office. Nathan felt something inside him break apart, the carefully constructed world he had built with Clara collapsing in an instant. The trust, the love, the years, it was all a lie. The woman he had planned to spend his life with wasn't just betraying him, she was doing it with Logan. The cousin who had never respected him, never envied him because, in Logan's eyes, Nathan had never had anything worth envying. Until now. The sound that escaped Nathan's throat was more of a laugh than a gasp, but it was hollow, empty. Clara scrambled to fix her dress, her lips parting in desperate words that meant nothing. Nathan, it's not. Don't, he cut her off, his voice quiet but slicing through the air like a blade. Don't insult me with excuses. Logan, ever the performer, exhaled a slow breath, running a hand through his perfectly tousled hair. Look man, these things happen. These things happen? Nathan repeated, incredulous. Logan had always been like this. Charming, untouchable. Always able to talk his way out of trouble. And Clara, Clara, was looking at Nathan with the kind of guilt that wasn't about hurting him, but about being caught. Before Nathan could say another word, movement behind him signaled the arrival of more people. His mother. His father. Uncle Richard. They had followed him, perhaps drawn by the weight of the silence. For a second Nathan thought, hoped, that they would take his side. That they would see what had happened and share in his outrage. But the moment stretched, twisted, and then the words came. Words that made the betrayal cut even deeper. People make mistakes, his mother murmured, her voice carefully measured. Mistakes. Nathan's vision blurred, not with tears, but with sheer disbelief. He turned to his father, the man he had spent his entire life trying to make proud, but there was no anger there, just a quiet, almost tired look, as if this were an inconvenience rather than a betrayal. Son, it's not worth throwing everything away over one stupid decision, his father said, a hand settling heavily on his shoulder. You and Clara have built a life together. You don't just walk away from that. Uncle Richard, his expression one of mild amusement, spoke up next. Look, I get it. You're mad. But Logan's young. Clara's young. This doesn't have to mean anything. Doesn't have to mean anything. Nathan almost laughed again. It was surreal, standing there, listening to his own family minimize what had just happened. As if catching his fiancée in the arms of his cousin in his father's office was just another bump in the road. Clara had the audacity to step toward him, hands reaching for his. He recoiled before she could touch him. I love you, Nathan, she whispered, as if that meant anything now. Nathan stared at her. At Logan. At the people he had called his family. For years, he had been the reliable one. The one who worked hard, who did the right thing. The one who loved fully and deeply. And for what? To be humiliated like this? To be told to forgive, to move on, because his pain was an inconvenience? His chest tightened, anger boiling beneath the surface, but more than anything, more than rage, more than heartbreak, there was a deep, sinking understanding. This was who they were, and they had never truly been on his side. As he turned away from them all, the weight of their words pressing into his back like a blade, Nathan realized that nothing, not his love, not his loyalty, had ever really mattered. Because in this family, betrayal was just another mistake. And mistakes could be forgiven. If you were willing to be a fool. Nathan didn't remember getting into his car, didn't remember the drive home. His hands were locked around the steering wheel, knuckles white as he replayed the scene in his head. Clara. Logan. The way Logan had smirked. The way his family had barely reacted, brushing it off like he had caught them sneaking an extra dessert instead of tearing apart his life. Mistakes. That's what they had called it. By the time he reached his apartment, his body felt like it had been moving on autopilot. He slammed the door shut behind him, the sound echoing in the quiet space he had shared with Clara. The framed photo of them on the hallway table caught his eye, her in that white sundress, leaning into him, her smile bright, his arm wrapped around her like she was the most precious thing in the world. He snatched the frame, not even thinking, and hurled it across the room. The glass shattered as it hit the floor, shards scattering across the wooden surface. His heart pounded in his ears, his breath came too fast, too shallow. He needed to get out of here. That night, he barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Logan's smug face, heard his mother's voice. People make mistakes. His own family expected him to swallow this, to pretend it didn't matter. By morning, his phone was vibrating nonstop. Clara's name flooded the screen. Nathan, please talk to me. It didn't mean anything. I was drunk. It was stupid. I love you. He let the messages pile up, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. He didn't owe her a response. Then came the calls. First, his mother. Nathan, sweetheart, I know you're upset, but you need to talk to Clara. She's been crying all night. You can work through this. His grip on the phone tightened. There's nothing to work through. It's done. Don't be so dramatic, she sighed, as if he was a child throwing a tantrum over spilled milk. She made a mistake, but you two have a life together. You don't just throw that away. Nathan let out a bitter laugh. She threw it away. Not me. She regrets it. She regrets getting caught. His mother's voice turned sharp. Family forgives, Nathan. That's what we do. Then you go ahead and forgive her. He hung up before she could respond. A minute later, his phone rang again. This time, Uncle Richard. Kid, Richard's voice was casual, like they were chatting over coffee, not discussing the fact that his son had just betrayed his own cousin. I heard you're making a big deal out of this. Nathan exhaled through his nose, forcing himself to stay calm. I caught Clara cheating on me, and you all acted like I was overreacting. So yeah, I'm making a big deal out of it. Richard chuckled. Nathan, come on. You're a smart guy. You really want to throw away your future over one little mistake. One little. Nathan had to stop himself from shouting. He squeezed his eyes shut, gripping the phone so hard his fingers ached. Logan, my own cousin, did this. Clara, the woman I was supposed to marry, did this. And you want me to just get over it? Be an adult about this, Richard said smoothly. People do stupid things. You've been so good to Clara, she probably just panicked. It doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Nathan nearly choked on the sheer absurdity of it. Panicked? Is that what we're calling it now? She tripped and landed on Logan? Richard sighed, as if he were the one being burdened. Look, you've always been the responsible one. The logical one. Do you really want to throw your life into chaos over some dumb mistake? You have a future with Clara. A wedding. A stable life. Nathan felt something inside him snap. You know what's chaotic? Staying with someone who would betray me and having a family that thinks it's my job to forgive them for it. Richard's tone turned cold. You're making a mistake, Nathan. No, Nathan said, his voice steady. I'm finally fixing one. He hung up. His hands were shaking, but he had never felt so clear-headed in his life. He had to get out of here. Packing was methodical. He wasn't going to waste another second in this apartment. His apartment. The one he had let Clara turn into theirs. The blankets she had picked out. The stupid little decorative pieces she had insisted on buying. Every inch of the place reeked of her. Nathan yanked open drawers, stuffing his belongings into bags. His shirts, his tools, the framed photos of his family. His real family, before Clara had wormed her way in. His laptop, his books, his life. Then he reached the closet. Clara's things were still there, perfectly arranged. The dresses, the shoes, the perfume bottles on the dresser. He stared at them for a moment, that bitterness coiling in his stomach. He didn't touch them. He didn't need to. He was walking away from this mess. By the time he was done, he had everything he needed. He didn't leave a note, didn't send a text, didn't owe her anything. He took one last look around the apartment, at the shattered frame still lying on the floor. Then he walked out. Nathan had always imagined using his wedding savings for something meaningful, a honeymoon, a home with Clara, maybe even the beginning of a family. Instead, he handed over the deposit for a cramped studio apartment with peeling paint and thin walls where he could hear the neighbor's dog barking at all hours. It wasn't what he had planned, but it was his. No Clara. No Logan. No family breathing down his neck, telling him to be an adult about his own humiliation. As soon as he settled in, he turned his phone on silent. The messages were still flooding in. Clara had switched tactics. The first texts had been frantic. "Nathan, please, I love you. We can fix this." Then they had turned defensive. "It was just one mistake. I was drunk." Now she was the victim. "Nathan, I can't believe you're treating me like this after everything we've been through. I made one mistake, and you're acting like I'm a monster. I feel like I don't even know you anymore." The sheer audacity of it made his hands tighten into fists. He nearly blocked her, but something inside him, some twisted sense of needing to see just how low she would sink, kept him from doing it. Only one person had been on his side. Emily. His sister had called the second she heard. "I swear to God, Nathan, if you even consider forgiving her, I'll slap you." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "Not much chance of that." "I'm serious," she said. "This family is insane. They've been making excuses for Logan's crap since we were kids, and now they're expecting you to just deal with this? Like you're the one causing the problem." "They don't even see it as a betrayal," Nathan admitted, running a hand down his face. "It's just messy to them. Something to sweep under the rug so no one has to be uncomfortable." "Yeah, because God forbid they have to deal with consequences," Emily spat. "Mom and Dad are pathetic and Uncle Richard," she cut herself off, her voice turning cold. "You know he's just doing this to protect Logan, right? He doesn't give a damn about Clara or you. He just wants to make sure his son doesn't face any consequences." Nathan knew that. Of course he did. Logan had spent his entire life coasting on Richard's money, Richard's influence, Richard's ability to smooth over every one of his screw-up. Nathan's betrayal was just another inconvenience that needed to be handled. He exhaled slowly. "They want me to come to dinner." Emily made a disgusted noise. "Jesus. Of course they do. Let me guess. Some fancy family dinner where they can all sit around acting like nothing happened? So Clara can cry into her wine and make you look like the bad guy for leaving her." Nathan stared at the formal invitation in his inbox. It was absurd. His uncle hadn't even bothered to send a personal message. Just a stiffly worded email outlining how important it was to resolve family conflicts in a mature and respectful way. He deleted it without replying. "Not happening." "Good," Emily said firmly. "You're done with them, Nathan. They don't deserve you." He wanted to believe that. But the weight of years spent trying to be the good son, the reliable one, still clung to him like a chain. Nathan had been doing his best to move on. 3 months had passed since he walked away from the mess that was his family, Clara, and everything he had built with them. His small studio apartment still felt unfamiliar, but at least it was his. Work kept him busy, and Emily had made sure he didn't spend too much time alone, dragging him out for dinners and making sure he wasn't drowning in his own thoughts. He was doing better. Not great, but better. And then the call came. "Man, you're not gonna believe this," his friend Greg said, amusement barely masking the edge of anger in his voice. "Logan just brought in your Mustang for an oil change. Claimed it was his." Nathan sat up so fast his vision swam. "What?" "You heard me," Greg said. "Acting like he owns the damn thing. But I ran the plates, your name's still all over it." Nathan was already grabbing his keys. "I'm coming." By the time he pulled into the garage, his heart was pounding. And there it was, his Mustang gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The car he had spent years restoring. The car he had given to Clara because he had thought, stupidly, she was the love of his life. And Logan had the nerve to parade it around like it was his prize. Nathan shoved open the door, striding in without hesitation. Logan was leaning against the counter, smirking as he flirted with the receptionist. He didn't notice Nathan until Greg loudly cleared his throat. "Nate," Logan said, blinking in surprise. "What are you?" Nathan cut him off. "That's my car." Logan scoffed. Seriously? He let out a laugh. Come on, man. It's Clara's. She. No, Nathan snapped. It was never Clara's. It's mine. I never signed over the title. And I sure as hell didn't give it to you. Logan's smirk faltered. Look, let's be reasonable. Nathan turned to Greg. Hand me the keys. Greg didn't hesitate. He tossed the keys over, and Nathan caught them in one smooth motion. Logan took a step forward, something desperate flickering in his expression. Come on, man. You're really gonna do this? Over a car. Nathan laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean the car I rebuilt from the ground up? The one I spent years on? The one I gave to Clara when I actually thought she wasn't a cheating liar. He stepped closer, voice lowering. Yeah, Logan. I'm really gonna do this. Logan's jaw clenched, his easy charm slipping away. You don't even care about her anymore. Why does it matter? Nathan shook his head. Because it's mine. And you don't get to take from me anymore. Logan pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. Nathan knew exactly who he was calling before he even spoke. Dad, yeah, we have a problem, Logan said, voice sharp. Nathan's here, and he's trying to steal my car. Nathan rolled his eyes and leaned against the Mustang, waiting. It didn't take long before his phone rang. Uncle Richard. He let it ring twice before answering. You're making a mistake, Nathan. Richard's voice came through, cool and controlled. This is petty. You really want to start a fight over this? Nathan stared at Logan, who was watching him expectantly, probably thinking his father's money and influence would fix this like it always had. This isn't a fight, Nathan said. I'm taking back what's mine. Clara's been driving it for months, Richard said smoothly. She's been taking care of it. Don't you think the mature thing to do is just let it go? Nathan's grip tightened on the phone. You mean the way you all expected me to just let go of what she and Logan did? Yeah, not happening. Richard sighed. This is childish, Nathan. Be an adult. Nathan exhaled sharply. You know what's childish? Expecting me to roll over every time you decide something is not a big deal. The title's in my name. The car is mine. End of story. Richard's voice cooled. You're making things harder for yourself. Not as hard as I'm making it for Logan, Nathan shot back before hanging up. Logan looked furious now, his face red as he shoved his phone back into his pocket. You really think this changes anything? Nathan smiled. A real smile. Yeah, I do. He slid into the driver's seat, turning the key in the ignition. The Mustang roared to life beneath him. The sound sent a thrill through his veins, his car, his power back in his hands. As he reversed out of the garage, he caught sight of Logan and Clara storming out into the parking lot. Clara's face was twisted in shock, her mouth moving, but Nathan didn't bother rolling down the window to listen. He didn't need to hear whatever excuse or manipulative nonsense she was about to throw at him. Instead, he revved the engine, watching as Logan fumed, helpless. Money couldn't buy him out of this one. And with that, Nathan drove away, leaving them both behind, exactly where they belonged. Nathan had expected fallout after taking back the Mustang, but even he wasn't prepared for how fast everything unraveled. Uncle Richard, furious that Nathan had embarrassed Logan and refused to keep the peace, lashed out in the one way he knew how: money. He cut off financial support to Nathan's parents without warning, slamming the door on the cushy, comfortable life they had always taken for granted. For years, they had leaned on Richard's wealth. It had been an unspoken arrangement. His father worked for one of Richard's companies, but everyone knew he was more of a placeholder than an employee. His mother never had to worry about budgeting, bills, or financial responsibility. Richard's money had shielded them from the realities of life. Until now. Nathan wasn't surprised when his parents called. He almost didn't pick up. Nathan, his mother's voice trembled on the other end, a mix of frustration and desperation. We need to talk. He exhaled, already exhausted. About what? It's your fault. Her voice sharpened. Richard cut us off. Do you have any idea what you've done? Nathan let out a dry laugh. You mean what he did? I wasn't the one who decided you weren't worth supporting anymore. His father's voice cut in. Don't play dumb, Nathan. You humiliated Logan. You embarrassed Richard. You pushed this too far. Now we're suffering because of your selfishness. Nathan clenched his jaw. Selfishness. That was rich coming from them. His mother's voice softened, slipping into the same guilt-laced manipulation she had used on him since childhood. We're going to lose the house, Nathan. We don't have the savings to cover the mortgage. If we don't come up with the money soon, she trailed off, waiting for him to jump in. He didn't. His father, less patient, snapped. We need your help. You owe us. Nathan scoffed. I owe you? For what? For everything we've done for you. His father's frustration boiled over. We raised you, gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? By turning your back when we need you. Nathan inhaled slowly, steadying himself. You mean how you turned your back on me when I needed you? When I caught Clara and Logan. When you told me to forgive and forget like my pain didn't matter. Silence. We're your parents, his mother finally said, her voice trembling. You can't just let us suffer. Nathan closed his eyes. He could picture them sitting in their pristine, over-decorated house, surrounded by luxuries they had never actually earned. And they still expected him to fix it for them. To be their safety net. He didn't even hesitate. I won't replace Uncle Richard as your ATM. His mother let out a strangled noise, like she couldn't believe he was actually saying no. His father cursed under his breath. Nathan, please. No, he said firmly. You made your choices. You stood by Richard and Logan when it mattered. Now you can live with the consequences. And with that, he hung up. The calls kept coming. Voicemails, texts, even messages from extended family urging him to do the right thing. But he ignored them. Then, 2 months later, it happened. His parents lost the house. The bank seized it after they failed to make payments, and just like that, the life of comfort they had always known was gone. Nathan didn't feel satisfaction when he heard the news, just a quiet, grim understanding. They had spent their whole lives relying on Richard's money, never considering what would happen if the tap ran dry. Now they knew. They moved into a small, run-down apartment on the other side of town. No gated community. No fancy furniture. Just a cramped space where reality finally caught up with them. And as for Logan? Nathan hadn't seen him since the Mustang incident, but he heard things. At first, Logan and Clara had tried to act like nothing had changed. They flaunted their relationship online, posting photos of expensive dates and weekend trip. But without Richard's financial backing, the cracks started to show. Logan had never worked a real job in his life, and Clara wasn't exactly built for struggle. The stress mounted fast. The money dried up. The arguments started. Then, one day, Nathan got a text from Emily. Emily, guess who's single again? Nathan blinked at the message, then smirked. Nathan, let me guess. Logan and Clara? Emily, bingo. She dumped him when she realized he was broke. Nathan let out a breath of laughter. He wasn't surprised. Clara had never been in love with Logan, just like she had never really been in love with him. She had loved the idea of security, of being adored, of having someone take care of her. The moment that became uncertain, she had jumped ship. He didn't respond to Emily's text. Instead, he closed his phone and leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of everything settle. For the first time in a long time, he felt free. Nathan had expected Clara to slink away into obscurity, to disappear into the background like a bad memory that slowly fades over time. But he had underestimated her persistence. The first message came late one night. Clara, Nathan, I need to talk to you, please. He stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over the delete button. He didn't respond. The next morning, another one. Clara, I made a mistake. Nathan let out a bitter laugh. Now she realized that? For weeks, she had stayed silent, pretending to be happy with Logan, pretending that Nathan had been the problem. And now, after Logan had crashed and burned, after her easy life had slipped through her fingers, she was back. He ignored her. Then came the calls, numbers he didn't recognize at first, but he knew. He could feel it was her before even answering. He never did. Finally, one evening, when his phone lit up with yet another unknown number, he blocked her. For good. She had made her choice. Now she could live with it. And Nathan? Nathan was thriving. Work had become his focus, and it paid off. His boss recognized his dedication, handing him a well-earned promotion. More responsibility, better pay, a chance to finally build something for himself without the weight of his family's toxicity dragging him down. The Mustang was running better than ever. It felt good getting his hands dirty again, fine-tuning every little detail. He had thought, once, that rebuilding the car had been for Clara. But now, every mile he drove reminded him of the truth. It had always been his. But the biggest change? Nathan had met someone new. It wasn't anything dramatic. No whirlwind romance, no reckless dive into something to fill the emptiness. It was slow, steady, real. Her name was Anna. She was nothing like Clara. Where Clara had been obsessed with appearances, Anna was effortlessly kind. She didn't demand grand gestures or flashy shows of affection. She just was. And for the first time in years, Nathan found himself enjoying the simple things. Conversations that didn't feel like a game, laughter that didn't come with an edge of expectation. It was easy. And easy had never felt so good. One evening, as he sat on his balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, he thought about everything he had lost. His fiancée, his parents, the life he had spent years building. And yet, he had never felt lighter. Sometimes, losing everything wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Sometimes, it was the only way to truly start over.